There's a particular sound water makes when it drips through a ceiling that's given way, not quite a splash, more deliberate than that. A steady, merciless percussion marking time like a metronome of neglect. 62 years of life distilled into that sound. Ping, ping, ping. In emergency rooms, they teach you that bleeding can be controlled, pain can be managed, even death can sometimes be negotiated with, but betrayal that seeps through the cracks of your foundation until the whole structure threatens to collapse. They say blood is thicker than water. They never mention how quickly it can turn cold. When strangers disappoint you, that's life. When your children stab you in the back, that's something else entirely. When you've spent decades saving others only to find no one will save you well, that's when you discover what you're truly made of and what you're willing to do when pushed beyond endurance. Sometimes, the most devastating storms aren't the ones that rage outside, but the ones that have been building inside you all along. The water dripped incessantly from her bathroom ceiling, each drop hitting the aluminum pot with a hollow ping that echoed through the cramped apartment. Eleanor Hargrove stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, counting the seconds between drops, 3, sometimes 4 seconds, then ping. The rhythm had become the unwelcome soundtrack of her life at 62. Damn it, she muttered, pushing a strand of Silver Street auburn hair behind her ear. The leak had started 3 weeks ago, a small watermark on the ceiling that had grown into an expanding universe of brown stains. The superintendent had promised to send someone, as soon as possible, words that seemed to have an entirely different meaning to him than they did to Eleanor. A sharp pain shot through her right hip as she bent to adjust the pot, a souvenir from decades spent on her feet in the emergency room of Boston Memorial Hospital. 35 years as an ER nurse had taught Eleanor how to handle crisis after crisis with calm efficiency. But retirement had brought a different kind of emergency, the slow-motion disaster of trying to survive on a pension that barely covered her basic needs. The radiator in the corner clanked and sputtered, producing more noise than heat. January in South Boston was unforgiving, the wind off the harbor slicing through the poorly insulated walls of her building. Eleanor pulled her cardigan tighter and returned to the kitchen, where her morning pills were lined up beside a cup of tea, 2 for hypertension, 1 for arthritis, another for cholesterol. The copays alone ate up a significant portion of her monthly budget. Her phone chimed with a notification. Despite herself, Eleanor reached for it. It was Olivia posting on Instagram again. Her beautiful 35-year-old daughter stood beaming in front of a sprawling lakeside property. Her arm wrapped around an elegant older woman with perfectly styled silver hair, her mother-in-law, Janet. The caption read, "So excited to help Mom J move into her dream home. She deserves every comfort after all she's done for our family. Blessed oust family first." Eleanor read it twice, a familiar coldness spreading through her chest. Mom J, not her, the actual mother who had worked double shifts to put Olivia through college without a penny of debt. But Janet, who had done nothing but criticize Olivia's choices until she married Janet's son. Nathan, a tech entrepreneur with the right connections and the right family background. She scrolled through the comments, each one a fresh paper cut to her heart. "You're such a wonderful daughter-in-law. Janet is so lucky to have you. That house is gorgeous. She'll be so happy there." Eleanor set the phone down, her hand trembling slightly. 3 months ago, when the building inspector had declared her apartment building in need of major repairs, she'd asked Olivia if she could stay with them temporarily. Their house in Beacon Hill had 4 bedrooms for just the 2 of them. They'd been trying for a baby for years without success. "Mom, it's not a good time," Olivia had said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Nathan's up for a major promotion, and we need to focus on making the right impression. You understand, don't you?" Eleanor did understand. She understood perfectly. She was an embarrassment. The shabby mother with the wrong accent who might say the wrong thing at a dinner party. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her daughter, who she'd raised to value character over appearance, who she'd taught that kindness matters more than status, was now ashamed of her while buying a house for her mother-in-law. Eleanor swallowed her pills with a lukewarm tea and glanced at the clock. She had to leave in 20 minutes for Mrs. Abernathy's house. At 62, Eleanor was still working, providing in-home care for elderly patients 3 days a week. The irony didn't escape her. She was barely a decade younger than some of her patients, yet she was the one bathing them, cooking for them, making sure they took their medications. She dressed carefully in slacks and a sweater that had seen better days, but was still presentable. Professional appearance mattered, even if her job involved changing adult diapers and scrubbing toilets. Eleanor had her pride. As she pulled on her coat, her phone rang. It was Daniel, her 38-year-old son. Her heart lifted momentarily. Daniel rarely called without prompting. Hello? Hey, Mom. His voice had the forced cheerfulness that immediately put Eleanor on alert. How are you doing? I'm fine, Daniel. Just heading out to work. Is everything okay? A slight pause. Yeah, everything's good. Great, actually. There's this investment opportunity that's come up. Time sensitive. High return potential. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Of course. Daniel, I don't have any money to invest. You know that? It's not much. Mom, just 5,000. I pay you back with interest in 3 months. Tops. $5,000. It might as well have been 5 million. I don't have it. Daniel, I'm sorry. What about your emergency fund or your credit card? I know you have that Visa with a high limit. The Visa that was already carrying a balance of $8,000, including the $3,000 she'd loaned Daniel last year for another sure thing that had never materialized into repayment. I can't. Daniel? Not this time. His tone chilled immediately. Fine. Forget I asked. I should have known better. Daniel. But he had already hung up. Eleanor stood in her cramped entryway, phone in hand, fighting back tears of frustration. This was what their relationship had become, Daniel calling when he needed money, Olivia posting pictures of the perfect life she created without her mother in it. Eleanor zipped her coat and stepped outside into the biting January cold. The front steps of her building were slick with ice that the superintendent had failed to salt. She gripped the railing tightly, taking each step with caution. Despite her care, on the third step, her foot slid out from under her. Eleanor felt herself falling in what seemed like slow motion, her body twisting as she instinctively tried to protect her bad hip. She landed hard on her side, pain shooting through her elbow and shoulder. For a moment, she lay stunned, the cold seeping through her coat. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, she muttered, pushing herself up carefully. Nothing seemed broken, but her right side throbbed, and she could feel the beginning of what would be an impressive bruise on her hip. A trip to the ER would cost her a $500 deductible she couldn't afford. She treated herself at home. The walk to the bus stop was agonizing, each step sending fresh waves of pain through her body. By the time she reached Mrs. Abernathy's elegant brownstone in Back Bay, Eleanor was fighting to keep her expression neutral despite the pain. Eleanor, dear, you're looking pale today, Mrs. Abernathy commented as she let her in. At 83, Josephine Abernathy was still sharp as a tack, missing nothing. Just the cold. Eleanor deflected, hanging up her coat carefully to hide her wince. The day passed in a blur of tasks made more difficult by her injuries. By the time Eleanor returned to her apartment that evening, exhaustion had settled into her bones like cement. She ran a hot bath in the cracked tub, adding Epsom salts from the dollar store, and eased her aching body into the water. As she soaked, she mentally calculated her finances for the month: rent, utilities, medications, food, bus fare, her cell phone bill. There would be nothing left over, certainly not the $5,000 Daniel wanted, not even $50. The constant drip from the ceiling seemed to grow louder, more insistent. Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to block it out. But the sound had become a metaphor for her life, a slow, steady erosion of everything she'd built, everything she'd believed in. She must have dozed off in the tub because the next thing she knew, she was jolted awake by a tremendous crash from the living room. Eleanor sat up so quickly that water sloshed over the side of the tub. The bath water had gone cold. What in the world? She muttered, reaching for her threadbare robe. As she stood, she noticed water on the bathroom floor, not from the tub overflow, but seeping under the door from the hallway. Eleanor opened the bathroom door to a nightmare. Water was pouring from the ceiling in her living room, not in drops, but in a steady stream. The crash she'd heard was the collapse of a section of ceiling plaster, which now lay in sodden chunks on her waterlogged carpet. The bitter cold of recent days had clearly burst a pipe somewhere above her apartment. No, 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 she gasped, splashing through rapidly rising water to her small living room. The sofa where she slept most nights to avoid the bedroom with its leaking ceiling was soaked. Water was pooling around her small television, her few precious books, the photo albums containing the only pictures she had of Richard in his firefighter uniform, of the children when they were young and still needed her. The electrical outlets on the wall were submerged. With a jolt of fear, Eleanor realized the danger. She waded to the circuit breaker panel near the front door and flipped the main switch, plunging the apartment into darkness just as the overhead light began to flicker ominously. In the dim glow from the street lamps outside, Eleanor grabbed her phone from where it sat charging on the kitchen counter, thankfully still dry, and called the building superintendent. "Harris Rentals, leave a message," said the automated recording. Eleanor wanted to scream. This is Eleanor Hargrove in 3B. A pipe has burst, and my apartment is flooding. The ceiling has collapsed. I need emergency help immediately. She tried to keep her voice steady. Professional, the same voice she'd used in the ER when calling for crash carts and surgical teams. Next, she tried Olivia, straight to voicemail. Daniel didn't answer either. Of course not. Why would they? Water continued to pour in, now ankle deep and rising. Eleanor knew she needed to save what she could. In the dark, she felt her way to the small table where she kept her most precious possessions, Richard's wedding ring, his Medal of Valor, the children's baby bracelets from the hospital, the few pieces of modest jewelry she owned. She stuffed them into her robe pocket. The photo albums were already soaked, but she grabbed them anyway, placing them on the highest shelf in her kitchenette. Her medications came next, then her wallet and identification documents. A loud knock at the door startled her. "Senora Hargrove, are you okay in there?" It was Mr. Martinez from across the hall, his voice raised to be heard over the sound of rushing water. "Mr. Martinez!" The pipe burst, and the ceiling collapsed. "Open the door! We need to get you out!" Eleanor waded to the door, but the water pressure made it difficult to pull open. "I can't open it!" A moment later, there was a tremendous crash as Mr. Martinez forced the door, the cheap lock giving way easily. He stood in the doorway, a short, sturdy man in his 70s, with another neighbor, a young woman Eleanor didn't recognize. Behind him, "Dios mío," he breathed, taking in the scene. "Senora, you need to get out now. The water is touching electrical outlets. It's not safe." "My things," Eleanor began. "Can be replaced," the young woman said firmly. "You can't." They were right, of course. Eleanor had spent decades in emergency medicine. She knew better than to risk electrocution for possessions. She clutched the items in her robe pocket and allowed Mr. Martinez to lead her through the flooded hallway to his apartment. "You can stay here tonight," he insisted, his wife already bringing towels and a change of clothes. "Tomorrow we will see what can be saved." That night, on the Martinez family's pull-out sofa, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and felt something shift inside her. Decades of holding it together, of making do, of being the reliable one everyone else could lean on while having no one to lean on herself. Something was cracking, not just her apartment ceiling, but the dam she'd built around her heart, her anger, her sense of injustice. The next morning, Eleanor stood in her waterlogged apartment, assessing the damage in the harsh light of day. Everything was ruined. The sofa, the carpet, her clothes, most of her books. The water had receded, pumped out by emergency maintenance workers overnight, but it had left behind a sodden mess that reeked of mildew and rot. The superintendent, Mr. Calhoun, a perpetually harried man in his 50s, stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Insurance will cover the structural repairs," he said without preamble. "But your personal possessions aren't covered under the building policy. You do have renter's insurance, right?" Eleanor stared at him. The extra $40 a month for insurance had been one of many expenses she'd cut when her prescription costs had increased last year. "No," she admitted. Calhoun grimaced. "That's unfortunate. The building owner will put you up in a motel for 3 nights while we assess the damage, but after that," he shrugged, "you might want to see if you can stay with family." Family. The word felt hollow. Eleanor nodded mechanically, accepting the voucher for the motel, a budget chain out by the highway. "When can I come back for my things? The unit needs to be completely dried out and treated for mold before anyone can stay here again. Could be a couple of weeks, could be a month. We'll let you know." A month. Eleanor felt panic rising in her throat. The motel voucher was for 3 nights. Her next paycheck wouldn't arrive for 2 weeks. Where was she supposed to go after Calhoun left? Eleanor carefully picked through the wreckage of her life, salvaging what she could. Her nurse's uniforms, kept in a plastic storage bin in the closet, had survived. Some clothes from the higher dresser drawers were damp but salvageable. The photo albums were a lost cause, the images blurred beyond recognition, decades of memories dissolved into colorful smears. As she worked, her phone rang. It was Olivia, finally returning her call from last night. "Mom, sorry I missed your call. I was at a charity gala with Nathan's firm. Is everything okay?" Eleanor stood in the middle of her ruined apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of her possessions, and something inside her snapped. "No, Olivia, everything is not okay. A pipe burst last night and flooded my entire apartment. The ceiling collapsed. Everything I own is ruined. I have 3 nights in a motel, and then I have nowhere to go. But I'm so glad you had a lovely time at your gala." Silence on the other end. Then, "Oh my God, Mom, that's awful." I'm so sorry. Are you, because I called you last night when it was happening? I called Daniel too. Neither of you answered. Another pause. We were both busy. Mom, we didn't know it was an emergency. Of course not. How could you? It's not like I've ever called either of you after 9 p.m. before. Eleanor's voice dripped with uncharacteristic sarcasm. Look, I need a place to stay. Olivia, the motel voucher is only good for 3 nights. Oh, Mom, I wish I could help. But we're in the middle of renovations on the second floor. All the guest rooms are torn apart. It would be chaos for you to stay here. Renovations. On a house that already had 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, while her mother-in-law moved into a lakeside dream home. I see, Eleanor said, her voice suddenly calm. Don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. I always do. Mom, don't be like that. If there was anything I could do. There is, Olivia. There always has been. You've just chosen not to do it. Eleanor ended the call before her daughter could respond. She sat down on a relatively dry patch of floor, surrounded by the waterlogged remnants of her life, and allowed herself to cry for the first time in years. Not delicate tears, but deep, racking sobs that came from someplace primal inside her. She cried for Richard, gone 20 years now, for the children who had grown into strangers, for the decades spent caring for others while no one cared for her. When the tears finally stopped, Eleanor felt hollow but oddly clear-headed. She had 3 days to find a solution. She'd faced worse odds in the ER. She would survive this too. The budget motel was exactly what she expected, a sterile room with worn carpeting, a sagging mattress, and the lingering smell of cigarettes despite the no smoking sign on the door. Eleanor placed her few salvaged possessions in the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed, planning her next move. She needed to find an apartment she could afford, which in Boston's rental market seemed nearly impossible. She would have to dip into her meager emergency fund, the same fund she'd refused to tap for Daniel's investment opportunity. The irony wasn't lost on her. After a restless night, Eleanor took the bus to the offices of Harris Rentals, determined to speak directly with the owner, Barbara Harris. The office was located in a small strip mall in Dorchester, wedged between a check-cashing place and a discount liquor store. The reception area was empty except for a bored-looking young woman texting behind the desk. She barely glanced up when Eleanor entered. I need to speak with Barbara Harris, Eleanor said firmly. Ms. Harris doesn't see tenants without an appointment, the receptionist replied without looking up from her phone. This is an emergency situation. My apartment flooded last night due to a burst pipe. The ceiling collapsed. Fill out a maintenance request form. The girl slid a clipboard across the counter. Eleanor felt her temper rising. I don't need a maintenance request. I need to know where I'm supposed to live while my apartment is being repaired. The superintendent gave me a 3-night motel voucher, but repairs will take weeks. That's standard procedure. Standard procedure is to leave a tenant homeless. This finally got the girl's attention. She looked up, annoyance clear on her face. Look, lady, I just work here. Ms. Harris is in a meeting. If you want to leave your name, I'll wait. Eleanor interrupted, sitting down on one of the plastic chairs in the waiting area. An hour passed, then another. The receptionist made a show of calling security, but no one appeared. Eleanor sat patiently, hands folded in her lap, the calm at the center of a storm she'd perfected during decades in emergency medicine. Finally, a door opened, and a well-dressed woman in her 50s emerged, escorting a man in a business suit to the exit. Eleanor recognized Barbara Harris from the company website. Ms. Harris, she said, rising to her feet. I'm Eleanor Hargrove from Unit 3B on Thompson Street. I need to speak with you about my housing situation. Harris frowned. I don't speak directly with tenants. If you have a complaint, there are proper channels. My apartment flooded last night. The ceiling collapsed. I've been given 3 nights in a motel, but repairs will take weeks. Where am I supposed to go after that? Harris's expression hardened. As I'm sure you were told, the building insurance covers structural repairs. Personal belongings and alternative housing beyond the emergency period are the tenant's responsibility. It's all in the lease you signed. I've been a tenant in good standing for 7 years, Eleanor said, struggling to keep her voice level. I've never been late with rent. I'm asking for reasonable accommodation while repairs are made to make the unit habitable again. And I'm telling you what the lease stipulates. If you have a problem with that, you can contact tenant advocacy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another appointment. Harris turned to walk away. Something in Eleanor snapped. Don't you dare walk away from me, she said, her voice carrying across the reception area. I spent 35 years as an emergency room nurse. I saved lives while people like you counted pennies. I raised 2 children alone after my husband died in the line of duty as a firefighter. I have worked every day of my life, played by all the rules, and this is what I get. 3 nights in a roach motel before I'm out on the street. Harris turned back, her face flushing. Security, she called. A burly man appeared from a side door. Please escort Ms. Hargrove out of the building. The security guard approached, but Eleanor stood her ground. The world should know how you treat people, how you profit off decent, hard-working people, and then throw them away when they need help. The guard took her arm. Ma'am, please come with me. Eleanor jerked her arm away, but in doing so, she lost her balance. She fell awkwardly, landing on her already injured hip, a cry of pain escaping her lips. Oh my God, a new voice said. A young woman with a press badge hanging around her neck had entered the reception area. Are you okay? She's fine, Harris said quickly. Just causing a disturbance. We've asked her to leave. Eleanor pushed herself up, wincing at the pain. I'm a tenant whose apartment was destroyed by a burst pipe. I've been given 3 days in a motel and then told I'm on my own. That's the disturbance I'm causing. The young woman's eyes narrowed. Really? And you are? Eleanor Hargrove. I'm Zoe Chen from the Boston Herald. I'm here to interview Ms. Harris about rental practices in the city. She held up a recorder. But I think I might have found a more interesting angle for my story. Barbara Harris's face went pale. Ms. Hargrove and I were just discussing options for her situation. Of course, Harris Rentals cares deeply about our tenants' well-being. That's not what it sounded like to me, Zoe said, her recorder still running. Ms. Hargrove, would you be willing to tell me more about your experience? Eleanor met Barbara Harris's panicked gaze with a level stare. I would be happy to. 2 hours later, Eleanor sat across from Zoe Chen in a coffee shop, finishing her account of the flooding and its aftermath. She showed Zoe pictures she'd taken of the damage on her phone. This is unconscionable, Zoe said, shaking her head. And unfortunately, not uncommon. Boston's rental market is brutal, especially for seniors on fixed incomes. I'm not looking for charity, Eleanor clarified. I just need a reasonable solution while they repair the apartment. Of course. By the way, Ms. Harris suddenly became much more accommodating after I mentioned my article, didn't she? Zoe smiled wryly. It was true. After the encounter in the reception area, Barbara Harris had abruptly changed her tune, offering to extend Eleanor's motel stay to 2 weeks and to waive the next month's rent once the apartment was habitable again. It's still not enough, Eleanor said. 2 weeks in that motel. I can't cook there. I'll be eating fast food or convenience store meals. My medications need refrigeration. I understand. My article will highlight these issues. It won't solve your immediate problem, but it might help others in your situation in the future. Eleanor nodded, grateful at least for the chance to tell her story. As they were preparing to leave, Zoe hesitated. Ms. Hargrove, have you reached out to any social services? There are programs specifically designed to help in situations like yours. Pride rose up in Eleanor's throat like bile. I don't need handouts. It's not a handout. You've paid into these systems your entire working life. This is exactly what they're for. Eleanor had spent her career helping others in crisis. The idea of being on the receiving end of assistance made her deeply uncomfortable. But what choice did she have? I wouldn't even know where to start, she admitted. I can help with that, Zoe offered. I cover these issues regularly. I know which programs actually work and which are dead ends. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. That evening, in her motel room, Eleanor reviewed the list of resources Zoe had provided. Emergency housing assistance for seniors, prescription assistance programs, food banks. Each item on the list felt like an indictment of her failure to provide for herself. Despite a lifetime of hard work and careful planning, her phone rang. It was Daniel. Mom, Olivia told me what happened. Are you okay? I'm fine, she said automatically. Just figuring out next steps. Look, I know you're angry that we didn't answer last night. I was out. Out. Probably at the casino again. Though he never admitted to his gambling. Eleanor had her suspicions about where all those investment opportunities really went. It's fine, Daniel. I managed. Where are you staying? Olivia said you're in some motel. For 2 weeks, yes. After that, I'm not sure. A pause. You could come stay with me in Chicago for a while. The offer surprised her. What about Rachel, Daniel's wife, from whom he was separated but not officially divorced? We're working things out, but the spare room is available. It's not much, but it's better than a motel. Eleanor considered the offer. Daniel's apartment was small, and his financial situation was precarious at best. More importantly, she had her clients here in Boston, the elderly patients who counted on her for care. If she left, she'd lose that income. Thank you for the offer, Daniel. But my work is here. I'd have to start over in Chicago. Yeah, I figured, just thought I'd offer. He sounded relieved. So, about that money we discussed? Of course, that was the real reason for the call. Daniel, my apartment just flooded. Everything I own is ruined. I'm living in a motel. Does this seem like a good time to ask me for money? It's not for me. Mom, it's a sure thing. If I could get in on this deal, I could help you out. We'd both benefit. Eleanor closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond words. I have to go. Daniel, I'll call you tomorrow. She ended the call before he could respond. Outside the motel window, sleet pinged against the glass. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to figure out a longer-term solution. Eleanor stretched out on the lumpy mattress, her hip throbbing despite the ibuprofen she'd taken. In the ER, she'd always told patients that pain was the body's way of saying something was wrong. The persistent ache in her hip, the tightness in her chest, the constant fatigue her body had been sending signals for years that something was wrong, not just physically, but with her entire life. The next morning, Eleanor woke to a strange sound, her phone ringing with a number she didn't recognize. She fumbled for it, voice rough with sleep. Hello, is this Eleanor Hargrove? The voice was male, professional, with a hint of a Boston accent. Yes, who's calling? My name is Howard Bennett. I'm an attorney with Geller, Bennett, and Klein in Cambridge. I'm calling about your brother, Robert Hargrove. Eleanor froze. Robert, her older brother, who she hadn't spoken to in nearly 20 years. After Richard died, Robert had sided with the fire captain who'd allowed Richard to enter the burning building despite the obvious structural instability. Robert had told Eleanor that Richard died doing what he loved, that she should be proud instead of bitter. Words that had driven a wedge between them that had never been removed. What about Robert? She asked, her voice suddenly small. There was a pause on the line. I'm sorry to inform you that Robert passed away last month. Pancreatic cancer. It was quite sudden. Eleanor sank down onto the edge of the bed, unsure what to feel. Robert had been her only sibling, her confidant through childhood and early adulthood, before the falling out, before he sided with the fire captain over his own sister. They had been close. Ms. Hargrove, the attorney prompted. Yes, I'm here, she said. I'm sorry to hear that. There's something else, Bennett continued. Robert named you as the sole beneficiary in his will. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. That can't be right. We hadn't spoken in decades. Nevertheless, you are the beneficiary. Your brother amended his will 6 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. He left you everything: his house in Cambridge, his investment portfolio, and his art collection. The estate is valued at approximately $10 million. The room seemed to tilt sideways. $10 million, she whispered. Before taxes, yes. Robert was quite successful in his investments. He left a letter for you as well. I'd like to schedule a time for you to come to our offices. Eleanor agreed to meet him the following Monday, moving through the conversation on autopilot. After hanging up, she sat perfectly still, watching the sleet against the window as her mind raced. Robert had left her everything. Her brother, who she'd written off as dead to her years ago, had made her a millionaire in his final act. Eleanor opened her phone and looked at Olivia's Instagram post again. The perfect house for perfect Janet, the mother who deserved every comfort. Not her, apparently. She scrolled further back in Olivia's feed. There were no pictures of her. Not from her birthday, when she'd taken 3 buses to bring her a handmade quilt she'd spent months working on. Not from Christmas, when she'd scraped together enough for a small gift certificate to her favorite restaurant. She was invisible. She opened her text messages and found the last exchange with Daniel, his message asking for money, her refusal, his coldness. There was a pattern here, one she'd been too blind to see, too willing to excuse as busy lives, different priorities. Eleanor walked to the bathroom and stared at her reflection in the spotted mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her gray hair. She couldn't afford to color anymore. Deep lines around her eyes and mouth from years of worry. Shoulders slightly stooped from carrying everyone else's burdens, but never her own. But in her eyes, something was changing. A coldness was creeping in, replacing the hurt. The woman in the mirror straightened her shoulders. Robert's money wouldn't just change her living situation. It would change everything. She picked up her phone and took a picture of the dingy motel room, the sagging bed, the water stain on the ceiling that reminded her all too much of her apartment. She texted it to Olivia with a simple message. No need to worry about me. Everything's fine here. Olivia read it. She didn't respond. And that's when Eleanor knew exactly what she needed to do. That night, as the sleet turned to heavy snow, Eleanor sat at the small desk in her motel room and began to make a list, not of things she needed to buy or tasks to complete, a list of debts not financial ones, but emotional, a tally of betrayals, large and small, a catalog of wounds that had never healed. By morning, she had a plan. Robert's unexpected gift hadn't just given her financial freedom, it had given her something far more valuable, the power to make things right, on her terms. The Cambridge townhouse was like something from another world. Robert's world, not hers. 4 stories of red brick and black shutters nestled in one of Boston's most prestigious neighborhoods. As she climbed the steps, key in hand, Eleanor wondered if Robert had found happiness here in his final years. Not that it mattered now. Howard Bennett, the attorney, had been efficient and respectful. The paperwork was straightforward, the letter from Robert less so. Eleanor, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Cancer has a way of clarifying things. I was wrong about Richard. I discovered the truth years later. The captain had ordered him not to enter that building. He went in anyway. That was Richard all over, wasn't it? Always the hero, even when it cost him everything. I was wrong to take the captain's side. I was wrong about many things. You deserved better from me as your brother. You deserved better from everyone. I've watched from afar as your children grew up and became strangers to you. I saw how they took and took while giving nothing in return. I recognized it because I did the same to you once. This inheritance won't fix what's broken between us, but perhaps it will give you the freedom I never had the freedom to live without compromise, without begging for scraps of affection from those who should love you unconditionally. Use it wisely, little sister. Robert Eleanor folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. Robert had seen it all, seen through the perfect family photos on social media, seen through the holiday cards with no mention of her, seen what she had been too blinded by maternal love to acknowledge. The townhouse interior was stunning: original hardwood floors, crown molding, a grand staircase winding to the upper floors. The furniture was masculine, but elegant leather sofas, antique desks, Persian rugs atop gleaming wood. Robert had lived well. Eleanor spent that first day wandering from room to room, touching surfaces, opening drawers, trying to reconnect with the brother she'd lost decades ago. In his study, she found albums filled with newspaper clippings, her nursing awards, community recognitions, even the small write-up when she'd published a book of poems through a local press 15 years ago. He'd followed her life while she pretended he didn't exist. That night, she slept in what had been his guest room, unable to bring herself to use his bedroom. Not yet, perhaps not ever. The next morning, she met with the financial advisor Robert had used. The investment portfolio was diverse and stable: blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, a few higher-risk ventures that had paid off handsomely. The advisor, a young woman named Sarah Goldman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, walked her through everything. Your brother was very strategic, she explained. He restructured everything after his diagnosis to minimize the estate tax burden. You're looking at about $7 million after taxes, depending on market fluctuations. $7 million. The number seemed abstract, disconnected from reality. What would you like to do with these assets, Ms. Hargrove? Sarah asked. What indeed, I need time to think. Eleanor told her. For now, let's keep everything as it is. Eleanor spent the next week settling into her new life. She hired a cleaning service for the townhouse. She bought new clothes, not ostentatious, but well-made pieces that fit properly and didn't bear the faint shame of discount racks. She visited a salon and let them color her hair back to its natural auburn, cut in a style that framed her face and took years off her appearance. She looked like herself again, or perhaps, for the first time in decades, she looked like who she was meant to be. Neither of her children called during this time. Neither noticed her absence from the motel, from her usual haunts. Barbara Harris, the landlord, had her new number, but no one else did. She was a ghost, vanished from a life no one cared about anyway. On day 10, she called Olivia. Mom, she answered, surprise evident in her voice. Is everything okay? Not, how are you, or, I've been meaning to call. Just the immediate assumption that she would only contact her if something was wrong. Everything's fine, Eleanor said smoothly. I've had some changes in my life. I'm in Cambridge now. Cambridge? What are you doing there? I've come into some money. My brother Robert passed away and left me his estate. Silence on the line. Eleanor could almost hear the gears turning in her daughter's head. Uncle Robert, but I thought you weren't speaking. We weren't. People can surprise you, even after they're gone. She let that sink in. Anyway, I wanted to let you know I've moved. I'm having the motel room cleared out. Moved to Cambridge permanently. There was a new note in Olivia's voice. Calculation. Yes, I've inherited his townhouse near Harvard Square. It's quite lovely. Another beat of silence. Harvard Square. That must be expensive. It is, Eleanor confirmed, offering nothing more. Well, that's wonderful. Mom, you deserve some good luck. Her tone had changed completely warm syrup, where before there had been only cool distance. Charles and I should come visit. It's been too long since we've had a proper visit. Had it ever occurred to her to invite her mother to her home? To the house with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms? That would be nice, Eleanor lied. But I'm still settling in. Perhaps in a few weeks. Of course, of course. Olivia rushed to agree. Just let us know when. We're very flexible. I bet you are. Eleanor thought. I should go. I have an appointment with a financial advisor. Another piece of bait dangled. Financial advisor, how much did Uncle Robert leave you? Exactly. The question came quickly, too eagerly. Enough, Eleanor said. We can talk more when I see you. Give my best to Nathan. She hung up before Olivia could respond. Daniel called within the hour. Olivia had obviously reached out to him immediately. Hey, Mom, he said, as if they spoke regularly, as if he hadn't hung up on her the last time they talked. Olivia told me about Uncle Robert. That's amazing news. Is it? Eleanor asked mildly. You barely knew him? Well, no, but it's great for you. You've had it rough. Had it rough as if her struggle had been some temporary inconvenience and not years of sacrifice and hardship while he lived in his downtown Chicago condo. Taking expensive vacations, he documented extensively on Facebook without ever offering to fly her out to visit. Yes, things are looking up, Eleanor said. How are you? Daniel. How's that investment opportunity? He hesitated just a fraction. Going great, really great. In fact, we're looking at expanding, but we need some capital investment. I was thinking, that sounds exciting, Eleanor interrupted. We should discuss it when you visit. You are planning to visit your only mother in her new home, aren't you? Absolutely. I was just about to suggest that. I could fly out next weekend if that works. So eager now, so attentive. Next weekend would be fine. I'll text you the address. After hanging up, Eleanor sat in Robert's study, her study now, and looked out over the Cambridge skyline. The chess pieces were moving exactly as she'd anticipated. That afternoon, she visited a lawyer of her own, choosing not Robert's firm, but a woman recommended by Sarah Goldman. Rebecca Lynn was in her 50s, with a no-nonsense manner and a reputation for aggressive estate planning. I want to create a new will, Eleanor told her after explaining her situation. And I want to set up a series of trusts. Very specific trusts. Rebecca nodded, taking notes. What are your goals with these arrangements? Eleanor smiled thinly, teaching a lesson that's long overdue. Rebecca didn't flinch. She probably heard worse. I can work with that, but let's phrase it more legally for the paperwork. They spent 3 hours outlining Eleanor's plans. By the time she left Rebecca's office, the framework was in place. The trap was set. All she needed now were the mice. Cambridge in winter was postcard-perfect historic buildings dusted with snow, gas lamps casting a warm glow as dusk settled. Eleanor stood at her front window, watching as the taxi pulled up. Daniel stepped out first, then turned to pay the driver, always generous with other people's money, never with his own time. She'd purposely not offered to pick him up from the airport. He looked up at the townhouse, clearly impressed by its grandeur, before climbing the steps and ringing the bell. Eleanor took her time answering. Mom. Daniel's hug was enthusiastic, enveloping. When had he last embraced her like this? Not at Christmas 3 years ago, when he'd shown up empty-handed and left early to meet friends. Not at her birthday last year, which he'd forgotten entirely until Facebook reminded him 3 days later. It's good to see you, she said, the lie coming easily. She stepped back to look at him. Handsome like his father, the same strong jawline, the same charismatic smile that hid a fundamental selfishness. This place is incredible, he said, looking past her into the foyer with its crystal chandelier and marble floor. Uncle Robert had great taste. He did, she agreed. Let me show you around. She guided him through the house, watching as his eyes cataloged every valuable item, every sign of wealth. In the study, he let out a low whistle at the collection of first edition books. In the dining room, he commented on the antique silverware displayed in a glass cabinet. That's been in the family for generations, she told him. Your great-grandmother brought it from England. It must be worth a fortune, he said, and she could almost see him calculating its value. Some things are beyond price, she replied. Family heirlooms carry stories, history. He nodded absently, already moving on to examine a painting on the wall. Olivia and Nathan arrived an hour later, bearing an expensive bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. Lilies, which she'd told her countless times triggered her allergies. She thanked them anyway and put them in the kitchen, away from the dining room where they would eat. Mom, you look amazing, Olivia gushed, taking in her tailored slacks and cashmere sweater, her freshly colored hair. Cambridge clearly agrees with you. Money agrees with everyone, Eleanor said with a small smile. Would you like some wine before dinner? She'd arranged for a catering service to deliver a meal-roasted rack of lamb, fingerling potatoes, haricots verts with almonds, the kind of meal she could never have afforded before, served on Robert's Wedgwood china. As they ate, the conversation flowed with artificial ease. Her children asked about Robert, about the inheritance, carefully dancing around the questions they really wanted to ask. How much? What are you going to do with it? Where do we fit in? I've been thinking about the future, Eleanor said as they moved to the living room for coffee. About legacy. That's so important, Nathan said eagerly. He was handsome in a bland way, with perfect teeth and carefully styled hair, the kind of man who'd never had to worry about how he'd pay his electric bill. Family legacy is everything. Eleanor nodded slowly. I agree. Which is why I've been thinking about how to structure my estate. The room grew quiet. She had their complete attention now. I've set up a meeting tomorrow with my estate attorney, she continued. I'd like all of you to join me. Of course, Mom, Olivia said quickly. Whatever you need. It's not about what I need, Eleanor corrected her gently. It's about what's right. That night, after they'd gone to their hotel, she'd claimed the guest rooms were being renovated. Eleanor sat in Robert's study, nursing a glass of his expensive scotch. She thought about the look in her children's eyes when she mentioned her estate, the naked want. The calculation? They thought they were so close to securing their future. If only they'd shown her a fraction of this attention when she had nothing to give them but her love. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Eleanor dressed carefully in a navy suit she'd bought at Neiman Marcus, applying makeup with precision armor for the battle ahead. Rebecca Lynn's office was in a sleek building downtown, all glass and steel. Her conference room offered panoramic views of the city, the Charles River glittering in the distance. Thank you all for coming, Rebecca said once they were seated around the polished table. She was immaculate in a charcoal gray suit, her dark hair cut in a severe bob. Eleanor has asked me to outline the structure she's creating for her estate. Her children and Nathan leaned forward slightly, their postures attentive, eager. As you know, Rebecca continued, Eleanor has inherited a substantial estate from her brother, valued at approximately $7 million after taxes, including real estate and investment assets. She watched their eyes widen. The number was finally concrete. Eleanor has decided to create a series of trusts to manage these assets going forward. Rebecca opened a folder and distributed documents. These are summaries of what we've structured, Eleanor observed as they scanned the papers, their expressions shifting from anticipation to confusion. I don't understand, Olivia said, looking up. This says the main beneficiary is a charitable foundation. That's correct, Rebecca confirmed. The Eleanor Hargrove Foundation for Community Healthcare will receive the bulk of the estate, approximately $5 million in assets and investments. But what about us? Daniel blurted out, then caught himself. I mean, that's wonderful. Mom, healthcare was always your passion. It was, she agreed, and still is. The foundation will provide support for retired healthcare workers who are struggling financially, as well as free clinics in underserved communities. Nathan cleared his throat. And the remaining $2 million that's outlined on page 3. Correct, Rebecca directed. They flipped to the page simultaneously, eyes scanning rapidly. $1 million to be held in trust for Eleanor's future care and medical needs, Olivia read aloud, and $1 million to be divided equally between Daniel and Olivia Hargrove, to be dispersed under the following conditions. She trailed off, her face paling slightly as she read the conditions silently. Perhaps you'd like me to explain, Rebecca offered. Olivia nodded mutely. The trusts for Daniel and Olivia are structured as ethical behavior trusts, Rebecca explained. Each will receive quarterly payments of $15,000, $60,000 per year, contingent upon demonstrating care and support for their mother. What does that mean exactly? Daniel asked, his voice tight. It means, Eleanor said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began, that to receive your quarterly payment, you must show that you've maintained regular, meaningful contact with me. Weekly phone calls, monthly visits, holiday celebrations, the things most children do naturally out of love. You will now do for money. The silence in the room was absolute. If either of you fails to meet these conditions for 2 consecutive quarters, Rebecca continued professionally, their portion of the trust will be redirected to the foundation permanently. You're bribing us to be your children. Olivia's voice trembled with indignation. No, Eleanor said calmly. I'm paying you to pretend to be the children I thought I had, the children I deserved. This is insane, Daniel said, standing abruptly. You can't put conditions on family relationships. Can't I? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. You've been putting conditions on our relationship for years. You only call when you need money. You ignore my messages. You buy houses for your mother-in-law while I live with leaking pipes and no heat. Olivia flinched at that last part. If you don't like the arrangement, Eleanor continued, you're free to walk away. The foundation will be grateful for the additional funding. You've changed, Olivia whispered, tears in her eyes. No, Eleanor corrected her. I've finally seen clearly. There's a difference. Nathan, ever the pragmatist, was still reading the document. There's more here, something about loan forgiveness. Yes, Rebecca nodded. Eleanor has documented loans to both Daniel and Olivia over the years, totaling approximately $28,000 with interest. She's willing to forgive these loans as a gesture of goodwill, provided both parties sign the trust agreements today. Those weren't loans, Daniel protested. They were gifts. Eleanor smiled thinly. I've kept every text, every email where you promised to pay me back. Just until my next commission. Mom, I'll return it after this deal closes. Mom, shall I continue? His face reddened. The choice is simple, Eleanor said. Sign and receive $60,000 a year for behaving like decent human beings, or walk away and pay back what you owe me. With interest? Rebecca slid the contracts across the table. You have 20 minutes to decide, she said. I have another appointment at 11. They signed. Of course, money speaks louder than pride, and her children had always been fluent in its language. Eleanor watched their signatures flow across the paper, Daniel's bold and aggressive, Olivia's neat and controlled. They didn't look at her as they signed away their pretense of autonomy. Congratulations, Rebecca said when the paperwork was complete. The first disbursements will begin next quarter, assuming all conditions are met. In the elevator down to the lobby, the silence was suffocating. Nathan kept checking his phone, desperate for a distraction. Olivia stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. Daniel shifted his weight from foot to foot, restless energy betraying his inner turmoil. I've made reservations for lunch, Eleanor said as they exited the building. There's a lovely French bistro around the corner. I'm not hungry, Olivia snapped. That's your choice, Eleanor replied evenly. But the agreement you just signed includes this lunch. First violation would be a shame. Wouldn't it? Her eyes widened slightly. Eleanor smiled, a cold curve of lips that held no warmth. You're going to monitor every interaction, Daniel asked incredulously. Keep score like some kind of mother waiting by the phone on her birthday. Eleanor interrupted, like someone checking her messages on Christmas morning, hoping for some acknowledgement of her existence. Yes, something like that. The restaurant was elegant but understated, with white tablecloths and soft jazz playing in the background. The maitre d' greeted her by name. She'd visited twice before, establishing herself as a valued customer. Ms. Hargrove, your table is ready, he said with a small bow. Once seated, Eleanor ordered wine for the table, an expensive Bordeaux that Robert would have appreciated. Her children ordered their food with minimal enthusiasm. Nathan, ever adaptable, attempted to make conversation. The foundation is a wonderful idea, he said. Education is so important. My mother always believed in its power to transform lives. Janet again? The saint, the worthy mother. How is Janet? Eleanor asked, taking a sip of wine. Settling into her new home. Olivia flushed. She's fine. I'd love to see it sometime. The house you bought her. Eleanor kept her tone light, conversational. It must be lovely. It's just a small lake house, Olivia mumbled. But it has no leaking pipes, I imagine. Another sip of wine. No water stains on the ceiling. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, about the trust conditions. Let's not discuss business over lunch. Eleanor interrupted. Tell me about your work. Daniel, that venture you needed capital for. He shifted uncomfortably. It's going well. We're developing an app that helps people track their fitness progress. Fascinating. And you need investment capital. We did. We found it elsewhere. I'm sure you have. She smiled. And Olivia, how's the gallery still representing that sculptor you were so excited about last year? For the next hour, Eleanor asked questions about their lives that they couldn't believe she knew the answers to, small details gleaned from social media they thought she didn't follow. From mutual acquaintances they didn't realize still spoke to her. She watched them squirm as they realized how much she'd been watching from the shadows while they pretended she didn't exist. After lunch, they stepped outside into the crisp winter air. Well, this has been lovely, Eleanor said, but I have plans this afternoon, perhaps dinner tomorrow. My house, 7 o'clock. We were planning to fly back tomorrow morning, Daniel said quickly. That won't fulfill the visitation requirements for this month. She checked her watch. You should change your flights. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. She walked away before they could respond, hailing a cab with a raised hand. She didn't look back to see their expressions. She didn't need to. As the taxi pulled away, Eleanor felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. She had won this round. Her children would dance to her tune now, perform the rituals of family affection for their quarterly payments. It was what she wanted, wasn't it? What she deserved after years of neglect and dismissal. Then why did victory taste so hollow? The next month unfolded according to plan. The phone calls came like clockwork: Sunday evenings from Olivia, Wednesday mornings from Daniel, stilted conversations filled with resentment barely concealed beneath banal pleasantries. How was your week, Mom? Did you enjoy the symphony performance you mentioned last time? The weather must be getting milder in Boston now. Eleanor answered with equal artifice, playing the role of the content mother while they both knew this was a transaction. Nothing more. She used her newfound wealth and time to transform herself. She joined a health club, working with a trainer who specialized in senior fitness to strengthen her body, particularly her troublesome hip. She refreshed her wardrobe, not with ostentatious designer labels, but with quality pieces that made her feel confident. She had her teeth whitened and got new glasses with stylish frames. The physical changes were significant, but the internal transformation was more profound. Eleanor joined a support group for retired healthcare workers, finding unexpected camaraderie with others who had spent their lives caring for patients, only to struggle with their own care in retirement. It feels like the system we devoted our lives to has forgotten us, said Martin, a former hospital administrator now dealing with Parkinson's. We know too much about what good care looks like to accept anything less. Eleanor nodded, understanding completely. We spent decades advocating for patients. Now we have to advocate for ourselves. It was through this group that Eleanor reconnected with Dr. James Kelly, a cardiologist she'd worked with at Boston Memorial for nearly 20 years. He was widowed now, still practicing part-time at a community clinic in Roxbury. Eleanor Hargrove, he said with genuine warmth when they ran into each other after a meeting. You look wonderful. Retirement suits you. James, she said, surprised by the flutter in her chest. I heard you were still terrorizing medical students at Memorial. He laughed. Only 2 days a week now. The rest of the time, I'm at the Roxbury Community Health Center. Not as glamorous as Memorial, but more satisfying in many ways. They fell into easy conversation, reminiscing about shared patients, colleagues who had moved on or retired. It felt good to talk with someone who knew her from before, someone who valued her as the skilled nurse she had been, not as a source of loans or a background character in a picture-perfect life. We should get coffee sometime, James suggested as they were preparing to leave. Catch up properly. Eleanor found herself agreeing, surprised by how much she wanted to. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Eleanor called both her children. I'd like you to come to Cambridge for the holiday, she said. Bring Nathan, of course, Olivia, and Daniel. Do bring Abigail. Who? Daniel asked, momentarily confused. Abigail Morgan, the young woman you've been seeing for the past month. She's all over your Instagram. Oh, right, Abby. I didn't realize you followed my social media. There's a lot you don't realize about me. Daniel, Eleanor said pleasantly. I'll expect you both on Wednesday evening before Thanksgiving. I've arranged for a car service to pick you up from the airport. They agreed, of course. $60,000 a year ensured their compliance. Eleanor hired a professional decorator to transform the townhouse into a Thanksgiving paradise, tasteful autumn decor. Fine china, crystal goblets that caught the light from the antique chandelier. The meal would be catered by one of Boston's top restaurants, delivered and served by staff she'd hired for the day. The night before their arrival, Eleanor sat in her study. She had finally stopped thinking of it as Robert's and reviewed her notes from Rebecca Lynn. The trust was performing well. The foundation was established, with its first grants going out to retired nurses struggling with medical bills and to a community clinic in South Boston that served uninsured patients. Everything was proceeding as planned. So why did victory taste so hollow? Eleanor poured herself another scotch and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering city below. Cambridge had embraced her, or at least her money. She'd been invited to charity galas, museum openings, exclusive dinner parties. People who wouldn't have glanced at her 6 months ago now sought her company, her approval, her checkbook, just like her children. The thought brought no satisfaction, only a dull ache in her chest that the expensive scotch couldn't numb. Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and cold. Eleanor dressed carefully in a deep burgundy dress that complemented her auburn hair, applied makeup with practiced precision armor. As always, they arrived together, having shared a taxi from the airport, coordinating to minimize their time with her. No doubt, Eleanor greeted them at the door with perfect hospitality, taking coats, offering drinks, introducing them to the staff who would be serving dinner. Abigail, Daniel's girlfriend, was a surprise, young, at 29, with a quick intelligence in her eyes that assessed the townhouse, the artwork, the obvious wealth with frank appreciation. She was the only one who seemed genuinely pleased to be there. Your home is beautiful, Ms. Hargrove, she said, as Eleanor showed her to the sitting room. Daniel told me about your brother's gift. What an amazing second act to begin. Thank you, Abigail, Eleanor said, finding herself warming to the young woman's unexpected candor. And please, call me Eleanor. Dinner was a masterpiece of culinary art and social discomfort. The food was impeccable heritage turkey, chestnut stuffing, cranberry compote with orange zest, and star anise. The conversation was strained, each topic chosen carefully to avoid the elephant in the room, the conditional nature of their gathering. As dessert was served, pumpkin mousse in delicate chocolate cups, Olivia finally broke. This is ridiculous, she said, setting down her spoon with a clatter. We're sitting here pretending this is normal when we all know why we're really here. Please elaborate, Eleanor said, taking a small bite of mousse. The trust, the conditions, this performance we're putting on. She gestured around the table. It's cruel, Mom. Cruel, Eleanor repeated, setting down her spoon. Let me tell you about cruel, Olivia. Cruel is calling your mother on speakerphone while you're doing something else, making it clear she's an afterthought. Cruel is forgetting her birthday until Facebook reminds you. Cruel is buying a house for your mother-in-law while your own mother's ceiling leaks. That wasn't the same, Olivia began. Wasn't it Janet deserves every comfort? I believe you said. What did I deserve? The apartment with black mold in the bathroom. The disconnected heat last winter when I couldn't pay the bill on time. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. You never told us things were that bad. I shouldn't have had to. The words came out sharper than she intended. Eleanor took a breath, regaining her composure. I was your mother. You should have seen me. You should have cared enough to ask. So this is punishment, Nathan said quietly, making us dance for our inheritance. This is consequences, Eleanor corrected him. For the first time in your lives, you're facing the consequences of treating someone as if they don't matter. Abigail looked between them all, comprehension dawning on her face. You're not going to forgive them, are you? No matter what they do now, it's too late. The table fell silent. A young woman who'd known her for less than 4 hours had seen what her own children couldn't or wouldn't recognize. The time for genuine reconciliation passed long ago, Eleanor said softly. Now we have a business arrangement. They pretend to care, and I pretend to believe them. In return, they receive financial compensation. That's twisted, Olivia whispered, tears in her eyes. No more twisted than pretending I didn't exist until I had something you wanted. Eleanor replied. Now, shall we have coffee in the living room? I believe there's a football game Daniel might want to watch. Eleanor stood, smoothing her dress, signaling the end of the discussion. The staff began clearing the table as her family rose, moving toward the living room like actors following stage directions. Only Abigail lingered, her eyes meeting Eleanor's with unexpected compassion. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I would have liked to know you before all this. The real you? Eleanor felt something crack in her carefully constructed facade. The real me died a long time ago, she told the young woman. Somewhere between the second job I took to pay for Daniel's college and the night I ate crackers for dinner so Olivia could have a prom dress, Abigail nodded slowly. I understand why you're doing this. I just wonder if it's healing anything. It wasn't meant to heal, Eleanor said. It was meant to balance the scales. Just don't lose yourself in the process. Abigail touched her arm lightly before walking away to join the others, leaving Eleanor alone in the dining room, surrounded by the remnants of a perfect meal that had nourished no one. Winter descended on Boston with theatrical flair swirling snow, bitter winds that cut through even the finest wool coat, Christmas lights reflecting off frozen puddles. The townhouse remained warm, insulated by money and the best heating system money could buy. December brought performative gestures of familial affection, Christmas cards with professional photos, Olivia and Nathan in matching sweaters, Daniel and Abigail against a backdrop of twinkling lights, phone calls filled with forced cheer, inquiries about her holiday plans that held no genuine concern. We'd love to have you in Chicago for Christmas. Daniel said during their Wednesday call, the reluctance evident beneath his carefully modulated tone. That's thoughtful, Eleanor replied. But I've made other plans. The relief in his voice was palpable. Oh, something special. Yes, she said, offering no elaboration. The truth was, Eleanor had arranged to spend Christmas at a luxury resort in Aspen, alone. She'd never skied in her life, but the resort offered other amenities: a world-class spa, gourmet restaurants, a lounge with panoramic mountain views where she could sit with a book and a glass of wine, watching the beautiful people drift by. She didn't tell her children this. Let them wonder. Let them picture her alone in the townhouse, surrounded by wealth but empty of connection. Let them feel a sliver of the guilt they should have felt years ago. The weeks passed in a blur of preparations. She met regularly with Rebecca Lynn and Sarah Goldman to review the foundation's progress. They'd identified the first recipients of their grants, 5 retired nurses facing financial hardship due to medical bills, and a community clinic in South Boston that needed funding for a children's vaccination program. You're changing lives, Sarah told her after one particularly productive meeting. These nurses would never have had this help otherwise. Eleanor nodded, trying to feel the satisfaction such praise should bring. The foundation was doing good work, important work, work that mattered more than the petty revenge she was exacting on her children. Yet when she lay awake at night in the king-sized bed that was finally hers, it wasn't the grateful faces of grant recipients she saw. It was Olivia's expression when she'd mentioned the leaking pipes, Daniel's discomfort when she referenced the money he'd borrowed, the transparent calculation in their eyes when they realized she had something they wanted. The week before Christmas, an unexpected visitor arrived at her door. Abigail stood on her doorstep, snowflakes melting in her dark hair, cheeks flushed from the cold. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced," she said. "Daniel doesn't know I'm here." Eleanor invited her in, curious despite herself. Abigail declined coffee but accepted tea, wrapping her cold hands around the delicate porcelain cup as they sat in the front parlor. "I broke up with Daniel last night," she said without preamble. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not." A small smile played at her lips. "And you shouldn't be. He wasn't the man I thought he was." "Few people are." She nodded, taking a sip of tea. "After Thanksgiving, I started noticing things. The way he talked about you when you weren't around. The way he checked the calendar obsessively to make sure he didn't miss the weekly call. Not because he cared, but because of the money." "And this surprised you?" "It disappointed me," she corrected. "I come from nothing, Eleanor. Foster care, scholarships, student loans I'm still paying off. I know what it's like to struggle, to work 3 jobs and still barely make rent. When Daniel told me about your situation, before how you'd inherited all this money, I assumed you were some wealthy woman who'd never known hardship." Eleanor laughed softly. "Far from it. I know that now, and I know what your children did or didn't do before you had money." She set down her cup. "That's why I'm here. I thought you should know that your plan is working. Daniel is miserable. Olivia is drinking more than she should. They talk about you like you're a tyrannical bank manager who holds their financial future in your hands. Isn't that what they always thought a source of loans, financial support, occasional babysitting?" "Probably," Abigail admitted. "But now they can't hide from it. You've made the transaction explicit." Eleanor studied her thoughtfully. "Why tell me this? Why come here?" Abigail met her gaze steadily. "Because I think you deserve to know that you've won. They're suffering. They understand, on some level, what they did. But I also think you deserve to know that this victory won't heal what's broken. I never expected it to. Didn't you even a little?" She leaned forward. "You're punishing them for treating you as nothing more than a resource. But now that's exactly what you become to them, a resource to be managed, appeased, manipulated for financial gain." Her words struck with unexpected force. Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered street below. "What would you have me do, Abigail? Forgive them. Pretend those years of neglect never happened. Hand over millions with no strings attached so they can continue to ignore me." "No," she said quietly. "But there might be a middle path, one that holds them accountable without destroying any possibility of genuine relationship in the future." "There is no genuine relationship," Eleanor said flatly. "There never was. Not once they became adults with their own lives." Abigail was silent for a moment. "My last foster mother, before I aged out of the system, told me something I've never forgotten. She said, hurt people, but healed people heal people. I didn't understand it then. I think I'm starting to now." Are you suggesting I'm not healed? I'm suggesting that none of us are fully healed, and that true power isn't about control or punishment, it's about breaking cycles. After she left, Eleanor sat in her study for a long time, turning Abigail's words over in her mind, the implication that her revenge, however justified, was keeping her tethered to the very pain she was trying to transcend. The suggestion that there might be another way forward, neither naive forgiveness nor cold retribution. She pulled out the letter Robert had left her, reading it again. This inheritance won't fix what's broken between us, but perhaps it will give you the freedom I never had the freedom to live without compromise, without begging for scraps of affection from those who should love you unconditionally. Use it wisely, little sister. Had she used it wisely, or had she merely inverted the power dynamic without truly freeing herself? The question followed her to Aspen, haunting the luxurious suite with its mountain views and fireplace that lit with the touch of a button. It lingered as she sat in the spa, as she dined in five-star restaurants, as she watched wealthy families exchange extravagant gifts on Christmas morning. On New Year's Eve, she sat alone on her balcony, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching fireworks explode over the mountains. Her phone buzzed with obligatory messages from her children. Happy New Year, Mom. Hope 2026 is your best year yet. Love, Olivia and Nathan. Wishing you health and happiness in the coming year. Call you Wednesday as usual. Daniel formulaic. Empty. Exactly what she'd demanded from them. As the final fireworks faded, Eleanor made a decision. She called Rebecca Lynn first thing the next morning. I need to make changes to the trust, she told her. Substantial changes. 2 weeks later, they all gathered in Rebecca's conference room again. Her children looked weary. Nathan resigned, all of them clearly expecting some new, more onerous condition to the financial arrangement. Rebecca distributed new documents with her usual efficiency. Eleanor has decided to restructure the trusts, she explained. The foundation will remain the primary beneficiary of her estate. However, the trusts for Olivia and Daniel are being modified. Her children exchanged nervous glances. The behavioral conditions are being removed, Rebecca continued. Instead, each trust will provide a one-time payment of $250,000 to be dispersed immediately. The remaining $500,000 from each trust will be held until Eleanor's death, at which point it will transfer to Olivia and Daniel respectively, regardless of their relationship with Eleanor during her lifetime. The silence in the room was profound. I don't understand, Olivia finally said. It's simple, Eleanor replied. I'm freeing you from the obligation to pretend. The quarterly payments, the forced phone calls, the obligatory visits, all of it ends today. You'll each receive a substantial sum now, and more when I'm gone, with no strings attached. But why? Daniel asked, confusion evident in his expression. Because the arrangement wasn't healing anything, Eleanor said. Not for you, and not for me. It was just perpetuating a dysfunctional dynamic with different power dynamics. So, you're just letting us go. Olivia's voice held a hint of hurt she hadn't expected. I'm releasing us all, Eleanor corrected her. You from the obligation to perform family feeling you don't genuinely possess, and me from the illusion that I can purchase what was never freely given. And if we want to stay in touch, Daniel asked, not for money, but because you're our mother. Eleanor looked at him skeptically. Do you want that? He hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. I haven't tried it without financial incentive in a long time. A startling honesty. Perhaps the first real thing he'd said to her in years. That's fair, she acknowledged. The door remains open, but I'm removing both the carrot and the stick. Whatever relationship we have or don't have going forward will be based on genuine feeling, not financial calculation. They signed the new paperwork in silence. When it was done, Rebecca excused herself, leaving them alone in the conference room. So that's it, Olivia asked. We just go our separate ways. That's up to you, Eleanor said, gathering her coat and purse. I'll be here in Cambridge, living my life, building the foundation. If you want to be part of that life, it won't be because I'm paying you or threatening you. It will be your choice, freely made. She walked to the door, then paused, turning back to them one last time. For what it's worth, I hope someday you understand why I did this, all of it, not to hurt you, but to finally set us all free. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind her. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. No obligatory phone calls, no forced visits. Eleanor threw herself into her work with the foundation, expanded her social circle, continued her coffee dates with James Kelly that were slowly evolving into something more. She was surprised when, 3 weeks after the meeting, Daniel called. Mom, it's me. His voice sounded different, less polished, more real. Daniel, is everything all right? A pause. Not really. I need to tell you something. Eleanor sat down, bracing herself. I'm listening. Those investment opportunities I was always talking about. They weren't real. I have a gambling problem. It started a few years ago, small bets on sports games, then poker, then online casinos. The money I borrowed from you, from Rachel, from everyone, it all went to pay off debts. The confession hung in the air between them. Eleanor closed her eyes, pieces falling into place, his erratic employment history, the constant need for just a little more money, the vague explanations of where it all went. I see, she said finally. And why are you telling me this now? I joined a program, Gamblers Anonymous. The first step is admitting you have a problem. The next steps involve making amends to the people you've hurt. His voice cracked slightly. I've hurt a lot of people, Mom, but you most of all. Eleanor felt a complex tangle of emotions, anger at the deception, sorrow for his struggle, a cautious hope that this represented real change. What do you need from me, Daniel? Nothing, he said quickly. That's not why I'm calling. I don't want money. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth and to say I'm sorry. For everything. Thank you for telling me, she said carefully. Recovery is a long road. Are you getting the support you need? Yeah, I found a good group. And Abby, she's actually been helping me, even after the breakup. She's training to be a counselor. She seems like a remarkable young woman. She is. Another pause. She told me she visited you, that she said some things to you. She did. I was angry at first, but she was right about all of it. He took a deep breath. Look, I don't expect us to suddenly have some perfect mother-son relationship. There's too much water under that bridge, but maybe we could try for something honest, even if it's just occasional calls where we actually talk to each other, not at each other. Eleanor felt a small, tender spot in her heart, a place she'd thought long calcified, begin to soften. I think I'd like that. Daniel? A week later, Olivia emailed, not called, but emailed asking if Eleanor would be willing to meet for coffee the next time she was in Boston. The message was brief, formal, but it was a start. In early February, a massive winter storm struck the Northeast. Forecasters called it the storm of the decade, with predictions of 2 to 3 feet of snow, hurricane-force winds, coastal flooding, and widespread power outages. Eleanor watched the news with concern, remembering winters in her old apartment when the heat would fail, leaving her huddled under blankets, afraid to run space heaters that would send her electric bills soaring. The morning the storm was set to hit, she received a call from James Kelly. Eleanor, we have a situation at the Roxbury Clinic, he said without preamble. We've got patients who need dialysis, others who need oxygen. If the power goes out, they're in serious trouble. The hospital emergency systems are already overloaded with priority cases. What do you need? She asked, already moving to her closet for warm clothes. We're setting up a temporary shelter at the community center. It has a generator, but we need supplies, blankets, medications, food, and we need people who know what they're doing. The roads are already getting bad. Text me the address. I'll be there in an hour. Eleanor called her car service, but they had suspended operations due to the weather. Public transportation was running on a reduced schedule, soon to be shut down entirely as the storm intensified. She looked out the window at the already snow-covered streets, considering her options. Ms. Hargrove. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, her housekeeper, concern evident in her voice. You're not planning to go out in this weather, are you? I need to get to Roxbury, Eleanor explained. There's a clinic setting up an emergency shelter. My son has a truck with four-wheel drive, Mrs. Rodriguez offered. He could take you. An hour later, Eleanor was in the passenger seat of a battered pickup truck, medical supplies and blankets from her home packed in the back. As Miguel Rodriguez navigated the increasingly treacherous roads, the young man handled the vehicle with confidence, the heavy truck pushing through snowdrifts that would have stopped smaller cars. My mother says you were a nurse, he said, eyes fixed on the barely visible road. For 35 years, Eleanor confirmed. Emergency department, he nodded approvingly. They're going to need people like you today. The Roxbury Community Center was a hub of controlled chaos when they arrived. James Kelly was directing volunteers, his white hair disheveled, stethoscope around his neck. His face lit up when he saw Eleanor. Thank God, he said, embracing her briefly. We're setting up triage in the main hall. We've got about 30 patients from the nursing home next door, and more community members arriving by the minute. Eleanor shed her coat and got to work, falling back into the rhythms of emergency care as if she'd never left. She helped establish a medication distribution system, organize the volunteer nurses into teams, and set up a check-in process for patients as they arrived. By mid-afternoon, the storm had intensified to whiteout conditions. The power flickered, then failed, plunging the center into momentary darkness before the generator kicked in. A cheer went up, quickly followed by a groan as they realized the generator was only powering emergency lights and essential medical equipment. There was no heat. "We need to consolidate everyone in the main hall," Eleanor directed. "Body heat will help, and we need to inventory all the blankets, coats, anything that can keep people warm." As the afternoon turned to evening, conditions worsened. The generator sputtered occasionally, causing moments of panic. The temperature in the building dropped steadily despite their best efforts. Elderly patients began showing signs of hypothermia. "We need more heat sources," Eleanor told James. "The generator can't handle space heaters. What about those outdoor propane heaters restaurants use on patios?" "Good idea, but how do we get them in this storm?" Eleanor pulled out her phone, surprised to find she still had service. She called Daniel. "Mom, are you okay? The news says Boston is getting hammered. I'm at a shelter in Roxbury," she explained quickly. "We have elderly and sick patients who need heat. The generator is only powering essential equipment. We need outdoor propane heaters, the kind restaurants use. Can you make some calls? Use my name, my credit card, whatever it takes." "I'm on it," he said without hesitation. "Text me the address." Within 2 hours, a convoy of snowplows arrived, clearing a path for a delivery truck from a restaurant supply company. Inside were 10 high-capacity outdoor heaters and dozens of propane tanks. The driver refused payment. "Already taken care of," he said. "Some guy from Chicago called the owner directly, said it was for his mother's emergency shelter." Daniel. Eleanor felt a surge of pride not for herself, but for her son. The heaters made a significant difference, raising the temperature in the main hall to a tolerable level. As night fell, Eleanor worked tirelessly, checking on patients, distributing medications, offering reassurance to frightened elderly residents who reminded her so much of her former clients. Around midnight, as the storm reached its peak ferocity, a young woman was brought in, heavily pregnant and in early labor. The ambulances couldn't get through the snow-choked streets, and the nearest hospital was now inaccessible. "Eleanor," James called urgently. "We need you." She hurried to the small office that had been converted into an examination room. The young woman lay on a makeshift bed, face contorted in pain, her husband holding her hand, terror in his eyes. "I'm Eleanor," she said, immediately taking charge. "I was an ER nurse for 35 years, and I've assisted in more deliveries than I can count." "What's your name?" "Sweetheart, Maria," the woman gasped. "It's too early. The baby's not due for 3 more weeks." Eleanor checked her quickly, keeping her expression calm despite her concern. "The baby has its own schedule, Maria, and it looks like yours is eager to meet you. We're going to help you through this." For the next 4 hours, Eleanor coached Maria through her labor, working alongside James and a retired obstetrical nurse who happened to be among the volunteers. The conditions were far from ideal: limited supplies, minimal pain relief options, the constant worry about the generator failing. But Eleanor remained a steady presence, drawing on decades of experience to guide the young mother. As dawn broke, with the storm finally beginning to abate, Maria gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The cry of the newborn echoed through the community center, bringing a moment of joy and hope amid the crisis. Eleanor wrapped the infant in clean blankets and placed her in Maria's arms. "She's perfect," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. Thank you so much." "Wow, what will you name her?" Eleanor asked, suddenly fighting tears of her own. Maria looked at her husband, who nodded. "Eleanor," she said. "Her name is Eleanor." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor felt something break open inside her, not the brittle shell of anger and resentment she cultivated, but something deeper, a dam holding back her capacity for joy, for connection, for meaning beyond the narrow confines of family obligation. The storm raged for another day, but the worst had passed. Emergency services gradually restored access to the area, allowing some residents to return to homes with power, others to be transported to hospitals or more suitable shelters. Through it all, Eleanor worked without complaint, catching brief naps on a cot when she could, but always returning to help. On the third day, as she was helping an elderly man with his oxygen tank, she heard a commotion at the main entrance. Looking up, she was stunned to see Olivia walking through the door, followed by Nathan, both bundled in heavy winter gear and carrying boxes of supplies. "Mom!" Olivia called, spotting her across the room. Thank God, we've been trying to reach you for days. Eleanor stared in disbelief. How did you know I was here? Daniel told us he's been coordinating with the Restaurant Association to get food delivered here. We were in New York for a conference when the storm hit. As soon as the roads were partially cleared, we rented a truck and drove up. She looked around at the makeshift shelter, the patients on cots, the volunteers working tirelessly. You've been here the whole time. Eleanor nodded, suddenly aware of how she must look exhausted, disheveled, wearing the same clothes for 3 days straight. Why? Olivia asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Because they needed help, Eleanor said simply. And this is what I do, what I've always done. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, a recognition, perhaps for the first time, of who her mother actually was beyond the roles of provider, supporter, or recent antagonist. What can we do? Nathan asked, stepping forward. We're here. Put us to work. For the next 2 days, Eleanor worked alongside her daughter and son-in-law, showing them how to check blood pressure, distribute medications, offer comfort to frightened elderly patients. She watched as Olivia, always so concerned with appearances, knelt to help an old woman to the bathroom, as Nathan used his business skills to organize the chaos of supply distribution. On the 5th day, when the shelter was finally closing as power was restored to the neighborhood, James found Eleanor organizing the remaining medical supplies. You were amazing, he said, his eyes warm with admiration. Everyone was, but you never stopped. Neither did you, she pointed out. True. But I didn't expect to see your daughter and son-in-law here, or to hear that your son was the one who arranged for half our supplies. He studied her face. Something's changed, hasn't it? Eleanor considered the question. I think maybe it has. Not everything. Not all at once, but something. That evening, as they were preparing to leave, Olivia approached Eleanor. Mom, Nathan and I were thinking, would you like to come stay with us for a few days, get some proper rest, our power's back on, and there's plenty of room? The invitation hung in the air between them, not offered out of obligation or financial incentive, but seemingly genuine concern. Eleanor was tempted to refuse out of habit, to maintain the careful distance she'd established, but she found herself nodding. That would be nice, she said. Thank you. 3 months later, on a bright spring day, Eleanor stood on a small stage at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Eleanor Hargrove Community Health Center. The foundation had purchased and renovated a building in South Boston, not far from her old apartment, creating a clinic that would serve uninsured and underinsured patients, with a special focus on elderly care. James Kelly had agreed to serve as the medical director, dividing his time between the center and his teaching duties at Memorial. Eleanor herself would chair the board, bringing her nursing experience and newfound business acumen to the role. As she looked out at the crowd gathered for the opening, she saw Olivia and Nathan standing near the front, genuine pride on their faces. Daniel was there too, looking healthier than she'd seen him in years, the haunted look of addiction beginning to fade from his eyes. Beside him stood Abigail, not as his girlfriend that relationship had ended, but as the center's newly hired counselor, specializing in addiction and mental health services. This center represents more than just healthcare, Eleanor said in her speech. It represents community, connection, the recognition that we are all vulnerable at different points in our lives, and that there is no shame in needing help. She thought of her old apartment with its leaking ceiling, of the motel room where she'd plotted her revenge, of the conference room where she'd wielded her newfound power like a weapon. I've learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or real estate, she continued. It's measured in purpose, in meaning, in the ability to turn personal pain into positive change. After the ceremony, as they gathered for a small reception, Daniel approached her. That was a great speech, Mom. Thank you. How are you doing, really? He nodded slowly. One day at a time, 6 months sober now. I'm proud of you. That means a lot. He hesitated. Listen, I've been thinking about moving back to Boston. Chicago doesn't have the best associations for me anymore. Too many old haunts, old habits. And what would you do here? I've been talking to Abby about it. The center needs an administrative director, someone to handle the business side, fundraising, community outreach. She thought I might be good at it, with my background. Eleanor considered this. Daniel had always had charm, connections, a gift for persuasion, skills he'd misused in the service of his addiction, but skills nonetheless. It would mean working together, she pointed out. Are you sure that's what you want? I think it is. He met her gaze directly. Not because you're bankrolling my life, not because of some trust fund obligation, but because what you're doing here matters. And maybe Maybe I could be part of something that matters too. Eleanor felt a warmth bloom in her chest, cautious but real. I think the board would be interested in your application. Later, as the reception was winding down, James found her standing by the window, looking out at the neighborhood where she'd once lived in such different circumstances. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, handing her a glass of champagne. "I was just thinking about cycles," she said, "how we repeat them until something breaks the pattern." "And what broke yours?" She considered the question. Pain, money, power, but mostly truth, seeing clearly for the first time. "And what do you see now?" Eleanor looked around the room at her daughter, deep in conversation with one of the nurses, at her son examining the clinic's outreach brochures with genuine interest, at Abigail organizing volunteers with quiet competence. "I see possibility," she said finally. "Not perfection, not the family I once thought I wanted, but something real, something honest." James's hand found hers, warm and steady. "That sounds like a good place to start." Eleanor nodded, thinking of Robert's letter, of his final gift to her. Not just the money, but the freedom to choose who she wanted to be, what legacy she wanted to leave. Outside, the last leaves of winter were giving way to spring's first buds, new growth emerging from what had seemed dead. Eleanor squeezed James's hand, feeling, for the first time in years, truly alive. "Yes," she agreed, turning away from the window to face whatever came next. "A very good place to start. The seasons change, inevitable as time itself. Trees that once stood barren against winter skies now reached towards summer warmth with new growth. Eleanor Hargrove had weathered her own seasons, the bitter cold of abandonment, the raging storm of revenge, and finally, the tentative warmth of a new beginning. Not the life she'd imagined, but perhaps the one she was meant to find. They say power reveals who we truly are. Money had given her the power to punish, but also the freedom to heal both herself and others. The walls she'd built around her heart hadn't crumbled all at once. Instead, they'd transformed, stone by stone, into something else, a foundation. Not for resentment, but for purpose. The broken ceiling, the flooded apartment, the humiliation. These weren't just memories now, but markers on a map showing how far she'd traveled. The children who had once forgotten her birthday now stood beside her, not out of obligation, but choice. Imperfect, genuine, human. In the twilight of our lives, perhaps what matters isn't the perfection of our relationships, but their truth. Not how many loved us unconditionally, but how we chose to use the time we were given. For when the last leaf falls, what remains isn't what we've accumulated, but what we've built that stands after we're gone.